Let's talk about how the Creative Commons is becoming increasingly popular as a way for companies and creators to work together in the same creative area. We can see companies and games such as Wizards of the Coast with D&D, Fate, Blades in the Dark from Evil Hat. We can see Knave and Cairn and other RPGs all turning to the Creative Commons license. How do you as a creator make the most of that license? How to use someone else's material or share yours? Let's talk about that all today on Success in RPGs. The Creative Commons was created by a nonprofit organization as a specific way to allow creators to work together without the narrow constraints of copyright or individual licenses intruding on the capability to work together. There are 6 different license types, and they all have different allowances. They also have versions that change over time. The current version is 4.0. Each, as the point of this video, so if you see a different version, hey, take a look at that, and it may have changed from here. I should also at this point say, anything I provide here is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. If there's money riding on your decisions, always consult a lawyer and make sure you're following steps properly when it comes to legal matters. But each license starts with the name CC, or the abbreviation CC for Creative Commons, then it has a dash and 1 or more letters marking the exact license type. We can find all of these licenses at the creativecommons.org/about/CC licenses. There will be a link to this and other resources in the notes below. Okay, so let's talk about this Creative Commons and its different sections. We have the following 6 or 7, depending on how you count it, license types and combinations. The first one is CC BY. This is what Wizards of the Coast used for Dungeons and Dragons. CC BY means that you are able to, with attribution, use the material. So Wizards of the Coast took the system reference document that has things like the rule for Fireball and what an elf is, and they put that in a system reference document, and in that document they said, this is part of the Creative Commons under a CC-BY license. We'll actually look at the language they use in a bit later. But that means that I can use the Fireball spell, and I can say, I'm using this, it's copyright Wizards of the Coast, they made it, here's the information that you can do to find where this came from. So, we'll talk about those specific prerequisites, but as long as you attribute the work, you say who made it to begin with, you can use that work because it was in the CC BY license. The second type here is CC-BY-SA, and the SA is what's called share alike. And what this means is the license that I am giving you, you must use the same license for anything you publish. So what that means practically is everything you create in the document that uses this Creative Commons must itself be Creative Commons material. So let's say that I want to use, I create my own role-playing game and I use the CC BY SA license. If you use my material, you must share your material because you used mine and because that's the license terms, okay? So it forces forward sharing. This is different if you watch the last video on the OGL. In that video, we say, okay, the Open Gaming License allows you to say which parts of this, if any, you are putting into the Open Gaming License area. So you can say, I'm going to share chapter 4 is open content and you can use it. Or I can say, chapter 4 is product identity and you can't use it. I get to choose when I'm using the Open Gaming License, the OGL, I can choose what to share or not, and it can be none of it. If the license is CC BY SA, you must share everything in your product, just as the people whose material you're using required sharing. Okay. And you may have heard of the ORC license that was started by a number of individuals and Paizo sort of took over. This CC BY SA is very similar to the ORC license. The ORC license, however, is specific to mechanics. So it says that if you create something mechanically in your product, you must share it. So if you create a system for naval battles or mechanics by which you can become a god, you must share those under the orc license. CC BY is similar in that regard, but it's not confined just to mechanics. Now, as an individual, you have to be a little careful with CC BY SA or as a small company, because it means that whatever you're creating, you are also sharing. And you may or may not want to do that. Maybe you created some really cool mechanics or lore or art that you feel is yours and you want to retain it. And now you can't because CC BY SA is the license required. You can't retain it, you must share it. On the other hand, if you are creating your own role-playing game and you want people to write for it, and you want to be able to use their materials and see this really grow and have lots of tools and content that everybody can use in the community of your role-playing game, maybe you want to use or consider CC BY SA to force people to share everything and grow that pool of what's available. It's a tricky question as to which to use. Personally, for me, I would not use CC BY SA. I almost always have things that I want to retain. I don't just want to give everything out. So, but add salt to taste as you desire. All right, so the next kind is CC BY NC. This is the license that means that you are not going to allow commercial use, non-commercial use only. So when the license is CC BY NC, this is almost like a fan content policy that we talked about in the first video. So there are some games, for example, Eclipse Phase allows for CC BY NC use. And I think it might be even share alike as well, the next one you see below. So CC BY NC means, hey, you can create all kinds of Eclipse Phase material, use their material when you're creating your creation, but you cannot profit from it, right? It's similar to how you could create fan content of the world of one of the Dungeons and Dragons worlds, but if it's not on the DM's Guild, you can't use, say, the Forgotten Realms or Eberron or Dark Sun in a product unless it happens to be allowed for publication on the DM's Guild the way Eberron or Forgotten Realms are. Okay, so that's non-commercial. You can't charge for it. That's pretty obvious. And you can find the variant where it's non-commercial and share alike. So everything you create, you can't profit from it, and you must allow other people to use it. That's great if you're looking for like a community that's having fun creating tools, but they're not profiting. You're not enabling creators to make a living off of it. But they must all put it into the pool that everybody uses. The next type is the CC BY ND. And ND is no derivatives. And what this means is that you can take their material and you can in fact profit from it because it doesn't say non-commercial, but you can't change it, modify it, and so on. Now, the Creative Commons license itself is based around the idea of crossing formats and media. So what this means is, let's say that I create a role-playing game and I use this license of CC BY ND. I would be saying that, hey, you could take my role-playing game and make a pocket version, right? It's the exact same rules, but you might change it to be smaller. Or you might take portions of it that are kind of player guides, but you're not changing it or modifying it. You might create an audio version or a video version somehow. That would be allowed because you're not modifying the work. You're not kind of creating your own work. You're still using the exact work, but you are modifying the format of it and could even profit doing so. So it's an interesting license. I'm not really sure what kind of use case I would come up with for it, but it is there as an option. And again, Creative Commons, well, I don't know that I said this before, but the Creative Commons wasn't created just for role-playing games, right? It was created for music, for art, for all kinds of reasons. So it doesn't always fit all of our use case scenarios that we would want as an industry. You can have both the ND variant and the NC variant. So CC BY and CND would mean that we cannot create derivatives and we cannot profit from it. So that would almost be like you are able to share this, but can't really do anything else. So you could make an audio version, but not profit from it. Okay. Good to know it exists if you come up with a reason for it. The last one is CC0, and this is really, sometimes it's considered a seventh type or just its own variant. It means that you are placing this in the Creative Commons. So you are essentially giving away your ownership of it. It becomes public domain, and everything that's in the CC0 can be used however somebody wants. They essentially own it just like you own it. Nobody owns it, everybody owns it. And so you have full rights to do whatever you want with it. There could be some reasons to use that as a license, but I don't know why you'd want to give up ownership of something you worked hard on that you probably want to in some way have control over. So in general, of these types, you're going to see the top two being used the most. CCPY, because you want people to be able to profit from it, and you want them to use your material but credit you. And then SA, if you want them to be forced to share as well. And it's worth mentioning that there is, on the Creative Commons website, you can look at the full text of all of these licenses as well as summaries of them. And there is also a license chooser. So you can go to a specific URL, which I'll have a link below, and you can get help in choosing which license you want. And the summary is different than the full text. So make sure you read the full text, not just the summary, but it helps you choose which may be helpful beyond the information that I've provided here. So let's talk about the comparison between the Creative Commons and the Open Gaming License. And I'll frame this a bit in terms of Dungeons & Dragons, but really this is applicable anytime we're talking about a company's specific license and the Creative Commons. And also if you as a creator or company are thinking of creating your game and choosing one of these licenses. Okay, so if I am using a specific license like the OGL, it has specific language. Even if it may resemble the Creative Commons in a number of ways, it has its own language and its own stipulations. So if you saw the last video on the Open Gaming License, D&D in its Open Gaming License has some rules such as you cannot use brand identity. You can't say this is compatible with Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, you can't even say Dungeons & Dragons. That's why you see products that say compatible with 5th edition or compatible with the world's most famous or old or whatever, some variant of that, as a way to avoid saying Dungeons & Dragons, even though you want everybody to know this is a Dungeons & Dragons product. The Open Gaming License also comes with rules around how to declare your product identity, like we mentioned before, and what parts are open content versus your product identity. And those are sort of important parts that you want to be really careful about. And there's all these steps, as we reviewed in the video, that you must follow to declare in this particular section what material you used from before and what material you're sharing and all of those stipulations. So Open Gaming License carries all of those requirements. Creative Commons does not have those requirements. So when you use the Dungeons & Dragons Creative Commons version of the SRD, you can say that your product is compatible with Dungeons & Dragons. You don't have to say 5e anymore. You can actually say Dungeons & Dragons. Now, that doesn't mean that Wizards of the Coast is giving up all of their trademarks or anything like that, right? So you still have to be careful about those kinds of things. But and you can't suddenly use things that are not in the SRD, right? So you can't make a Planescape adventure or anything like that because that's not something that's possible through Creative Commons. It isn't in the SRD. It's not open content or Creative Commons content. But those are really important differences, right? That the OGL has these very specific stipulations. The Creative Commons is far broader. And really, the Creative Commons is a lot easier to use because you just add a small attribution statement and off you go. You can just make your product. One constraint that the Creative Commons does have is because it doesn't really have language around stipulating what is open content and what is product identity. The best way to create Creative Commons content and share that out there, Creative Commons material, is for you to create a separate document that contains your Creative Commons work. So for example, in the product that I'm working on with Mike Shea and Scott Fitzgerald Gray called Forge of Foes, which is this really cool monster book, not Book of Monsters, but how to use monsters. Check it out. It's awesome. We have our product. There it is. You can buy it. You can hold the book. You can read the PDF. Separately, we will have a Creative Commons document that contains all of the Creative Commons material from that work. That way, it's really clear this is the Creative Commons material that that you can use. And anything not in that document you can't use. So, and this is because there isn't really specific legal language that you would use to say this is creative, this is not. And so it's a lot safer. And what I would suggest is just make your own document with what is Creative Commons that you want others to be able to use. And that's the easiest way to share Creative Commons material. So hopefully this helps to compare the two options of the CC license and OGL together. I'll give you an example of an advantage for the open gaming license. So a lot of OGL material is out there that you can use only with the open gaming license. You may know that I'm a big fan of the Flumph. The Flumph is available through the open gaming license through a company that got special permission to use it back in 3rd edition. So I can use the open gaming license to create Flumph material, to use Flumphs, because that's how that is accessible. It's not available in the SRD. It's available through a third party's open gaming license, open content. I can't use the Creative Commons to put the Flumph in my product because it's not in the SRD under the Creative Commons. That same is true if, let's say, you wanted to use a Kobold Press monster that's been made available through the open gaming license. If they don't go back and put it in the Creative Commons, you won't be able to use it. If they do put it in the Creative Commons, then you can use the Creative Commons license and refer to that. So if you want to use prior OGL material, and that's really important to you, then the OGL would be an advantage to you so that you can use that material. You can do both. So an option for you as a creator is you could say, create your product and say, hey, here is the OGL version that I share out to the world of the following open content for use for those who use the OGL. And here is my Creative Commons material for those who want to use the Creative Commons license. And that is what D&D has done. So Wizards of the Coast has an SRD under both the Creative Commons and the open gaming license, and you can use either for Dungeons & Dragons. So companies can also do that. Okay, so let's talk about how you can use someone else's Creative Commons product. So you are a creator, and there is a Creative Commons license that a role-playing game used, and you want to use their content and build a product based off of it. How do we do that? All right, so it involves a number of steps. None of these steps are actually truly that complex. First, you have to include attribution, and this is the most obvious requirement. The Creative Commons actually doesn't really have like hard steps the way that the open gaming license does. But these are the things you must do to comply with the language of that license. Again, I'm not a lawyer. If you're in doubt, consult a lawyer. Don't try to skip on these steps. Honor the industry, honor the company that is sharing things. So step 1, include attribution. This means that you should state the copyright year that was used for this material, the author or authors of the material, the title of the product from which you're taking this Creative Commons content from, the type of license, really important. So is it CC BY 4.0, 3 point something? Like you want to have that available, and a link to where they can get the product. Probably the creator has been smart enough to provide this for you. Wizards of the Coast, for example, and we'll look at some examples later, they provide the statement that you should use. And if you are a creator that you want to share things for others to use, include that attribution statement to make this first step really easy. Okay, step 2, modification statement. Under version 4.0, you are required to state whether you modified the material. So if I use the fireball, but I make it a cold ball and it's based on the fireball, I need to say that I have modified the content I'm using. It doesn't make it clear exactly to what extent you must declare all of this, but you must state modifying, and use your judgment here as to how best to make sure people can follow and understand what you're doing. In fact, I think the easiest way would be like if you had a cold ball spell that you would underneath it say based off of the fireball, and then up on your copyright page you'd say includes modified material, something like that. Okay. Third part here is only use what is in the Creative Commons. This may sound obvious, but there are a lot of creators that have gone awry in this step. So you're using the SRD for D&D, you can't pull in Planescape as a setting or refer to Elminster or anything like that, right? You have to obey what is actually in that document, and you can't use what isn't in that document. If you somehow think that through normal law you are able to use some material, that is your judgment call, and you may want to consult a lawyer before you put yourself in a position where you could be out a lot of money by having to shred material you've created or something like that, right? So safe route, use only what is involved in that Creative Commons material that you're drawing from. You're using Blades in the Dark, it may not be the whole role-playing game. Check what it says that you can use and what you can't. Fourth is positive use. And this is not even really something that should even go in the legal part of it itself, though it is, which is that, you can't use the D&D SRD or Fate or something like that in a game that is all about ridiculing that company, right? Or that is going to be some horrible version of that game with all kinds of problematic content, such that the company is going to hate that you did this, right? And want to sue you. They will be able to go after you if you're damaging them through your use of the Creative Commons. So make sure it's positive, right? That the company would be happy with what you're doing with that material. The last part is be careful that the material you're drawing from is truly CC BY. And if it's share alike, the SA, know that and be okay with the fact that everything you're creating can be used by others, and that you don't, you retain the copyright, but other people can use it. It's not just yours. If it's NC, you can't make money off of it. So you would really want to know that up front before you invest a whole bunch of work in your product. And if it's ND, then you can't modify anything that you are using. And so that's also very important. So check the exact license type. Make sure you know. I've had a lot of interactions online recently talking about the Creative Commons, and sometimes people will say, oh, game X, Y, and Z, it's under the Creative Commons. And I say, well, yeah, but it's CC, NC, and D, so not really. You can't create for it and profit from it, and so that kind of shuts that down. So let's actually take a step back before we look at these examples, and let's just quickly look at the CC, the Creative Commons website, so creativecommons.org. If you go there, you can see how this is what it'll look like when it walks through the different license options. And you'll see these sort of symbols on the side. Those are icons that you can also use in your product to signify what kind of license you're using. You can also use these icons in websites and locations like that. So this is the nice overview that you get if you look at the different license types and the little symbols that come with it. I would not rely solely on the symbols. I think those are a little confusing for folks who don't understand it, but it's good to know about. And like I talked about, there's that Creative Commons license chooser, which is really useful, that helps you go through and decide, what are you going to be doing, what are you allowing, and helps you select it. It's also worth noting that when we go to any one of these particular licenses, you can then click on it, and it'll give you, again, sort of a summary here, but you can go to the specific license, and that license language then shows up with all of the specific parts of the language, okay? All right, now let's look at Level Up 5e. This is a great website that Ian World has created for their Level Up 5e RPG that uses both the Creative Commons and OGL versions and provides their material in both versions. So you can see they walk you through what the Creative Commons is, includes a lot of information about the types. It's really useful. It's a nice reference to go to. I'll have a link down below. But it shows you things like how to give attribution, including for their own work that they're using. And it even shows examples of how to create those attribution statements. So for their material, for example, this work includes material taken from the A5E system reference document by Ian Publishing and available at A5ESRD.com based on Level Up 5th edition, available, blah, blah, blah. So, and then the license information. So this is exactly what we would put on our product if we were using some of the A5E SRD in a product. through the Creative Commons license. Awesome, right? Similarly, we can look at what D&D rights. So when we open up the Creative Commons SRD from the Wizards of the Coast dndbeyond.com website, we can find here that it gives you the license type, it names the license and the version, and then it tells you you must have the following attribution statement in your work, and we can see that attribution statement right here, right? And then we can copy that and paste it directly into our product when we are using that. And then they do say that they make it clear that you can say that your work is compatible with 5th edition or 5e compatible, and they ask you not to include any other attribution other than what is above. And they include a disclaimer statement. We'll talk about that in a bit. Fate, they have a whole website here on how to license Fate, and it includes a number of helpful links, all of their system reference documents for all the different types of games they have, Atomic Robo, War of the Ashes. All of these have SRDs for them, and they talk to you about how to use the Fate SRDs with the Creative Commons, and it includes things like, hey, here's the attribution statement you use, right? So they've made it really easy for us. We can use their material from that SRD, and we just put this into our document so that everybody knows in a very clear page. Mike Shea has released the Lazy GM's resource document. And so he puts here what the attribution should be with his name and link and the license type that it is. So same kind of format. And he, in fact, does say, hey, this includes content from the Wizards of the Coast documents. So this is a really good way of seeing both his own statement for anyone who wants to use this material, and he is referencing, as he should, that he has used material from someone else, right? So that's how it kind of passes on. And then he provides everything here in this web page that you can use that is in the Creative Commons. One more example as a contrast, and this is Eclipse Phase, a really fun sci-fi RPG. So they are in the Creative Commons, but when we read it, we can see that it is NC-SA. So anything you create, you must share, but it's non-commercial, right? And there's a link here, and they break down what you can do and how to do the attribution. So it's all very clear here, but you as a creator must understand, hey, NC, non-commercial, I can't profit from this, even though I can create and remix and do my own things. I can't profit from it, and anything I create, I have to allow others to use it as well. Now, let's talk about the other situation. So we just finished saying, hey, someone else created material, a role-playing game with Creative Commons, and we wanted to use it in our product. Now let's go the opposite way. We are creating a product, and we want to say it is in the Creative Commons, or some portion of it is going to be in the Creative Commons. So how do we use Creative Commons and make it available for others to use? So it's going to involve 7 steps. The first is, like we talked about before, choosing a license, right? So how do you want people to be able to access your materials? Can they profit from it? Must they share whatever they create so that you can use it and others can use it, and force them into that sharing? That's an important consideration. So step 1 is you choose your license and understand all of what it says. Read it very carefully. Then the second is adding the license statement to your product, right? We just looked at those examples, like what Wizards of the Coast places in their SRD, right? So, and that really is the advice I would give to you is create an SRD, create a document that has only the material that you are putting in the Creative Commons, and then up front, add that statement that says this material is Creative Commons under this license, this version, so that it is very clear to everybody that this document is all Creative Commons, right? Your RPG might be bigger than that, but this is the Creative Commons version. So that's step 2. Step 3 is the attribution guidance. As we saw in some of those early examples, it's really good to say you must include the following attribution statement and then list those, right? So if we take a look at Wizards of the Coast license here, right? This provides, doesn't look particularly easy to read there, but it's a very clear statement of this is what you must place in your document when you use our product. So that attribution guidance is very important. We also saw in that Wizards of the Coast example that it had a disclaimer statement. You were allowed to, under the Creative Commons, state that you are not liable for all of the for anything beyond your liability is limited to what this Creative Commons license says. So a typical language is Section 5 of CC-BY-4.0 includes a disclaimer of warranties and limitation of liability that limits our liability to you. So you're just referring the fact that that license limits liability. So they can't sue you for some wild decision, right? So like if you shared something that's inaccurate or your customers don't like it or whatever else, like, well, great, that's not something I'm liable for, right? I'm just giving it to you to use, but I'm not assuming liability for things. Then the next item is a modification reminder. So under 4.0 version, probably later, of the Creative Commons license, a creator must say whether they modified your material. So you may want to remind them by stating, if you modify our material, make sure that you have a notice of what you modified, so that it's clear that this is not our work, but it's something you modified. Step 6 is note any Creative Commons product that you are using in your material, right? So if you are creating an RPG, but you use someone else's Creative Commons in it, then note that. So for example, Cairn and Knave, Cairn is based off of Knave, so it notes that it uses the Creative Commons material from Knave so that it's very obvious that this relationship exists and that some material's there and someone can go back and use the original material. So make sure you do that so that it's clear what material you are using that comes from someone else, just as you want someone to label your material you're using. Last step here is no other requirements. And what this means is you can't add terms that restrict other people from doing anything that the license permits. So you can't sort of add additional stipulations, right? I can't say, hey, you can use what I do, but every time you use it, you've got to give me $1. Or, you must, I don't know, somehow tell everybody to come to my website. Like, no, there's no additional stipulations. So don't add more stipulations to the use of that material because you can't. You're using that license. The license is what the license is. You can make requests, but not really legally, right? So you could say, I think Fate and a couple of others will make some requests that please, something like if you use my material. A common one you see is, if you use my material in a product, please contact me at email.com and tell me so that I can see what you did with the product, right? That's a fun thing to add, not a requirement. You're just asking out of the kindness of their heart that they notify you when they create your product so that you can maybe have a link to it on your webpage and just see how your creations are spreading. So that's kind of a fun thing you can add, but you can add it as a legal requirement. So let's close with a review of the actual language of the Creative Commons. Again, not a lawyer, but just to show you, this is when you've got that summary view, but when you click on the actual license itself, then we can see the license. It is available in various other languages. Actually pretty cool, and how well it's translated. And you can see all of the different pieces to the license as you go through that document, right? It is an actual license. It's not a concept. It's a license. So section 1 of the license defines things. What is an adapted material? What is copyright? These various pieces. It just includes definitions. It's very similar to what we saw with the Open Gaming license, having a definition section up front. Very typical for a legal document. Read them, understand them. I'm not going to review them here. Section 2, the scope. So this really talks through, for the license itself, what it covers. It's worldwide, it's royalty free, non-sub-licensable, non-exclusive, and it's irrevocable, right? All the things we want out of a license. When we are taking on this license, either using it or becoming part of it by using someone's material, we are gaining this ability to never worry about royalties, never worry about some additional scope or it ending or anything like that. We are told that we can reproduce and share the licensed material in whole or in part. We can produce, reproduce, and share adapted material. There are no limitations to media or format. So you can take Dungeons & Dragons Fireball and turn it into a song. You can create interpretive dance or pantomime. You can add it to a virtual tabletop. You can put it online, right? All of these things that actually Wizards of the Coast was apparently worried about late last year and early this year. Well, those things are now available through the Creative Commons because the Creative Commons license actually tells you that. An important one, you can't make it seem like the use of someone's Creative Commons implies endorsement of your product in any way by that creator. So I am not allowed to say, let's say that I use Mike Shea's Lazy GM in my product. I can't say, that Mike Shea somehow is signing off on my product. Or if Mike Shea were to use one of my products that I put into the Creative Commons, he can't say that I'm endorsing his, right? Or that and I can't say that his use of my product means he's endorsing my product. Like there's no, you can't go beyond those bounds in any way like that. So that's all very important. You are not granted patent or trademark rights. So nobody can collect royalties or anything like that. This is all free of that kind of condition. Section 3, conditions. Attribution, if you share it, you must retain the attribution information from the creator. You must identify the copyright notice, the notice referring to this license, so what kind of license it is, the disclaimer of warranties, URL or hyperlink to the licensed material to the extent that it's reasonably practical. So if you at all can point to their product, you should, right? That's what you want to do. Indicate if you modified the material and retain an indication of any previous modifications. So if there was a chain that somebody took Fireball and made it Cold Ball, and you want to use their Cold Ball, you want to try to retain that chain of events, right? Using the Cold Ball by Kobold Press, I'm making this up, based on the Wizards of the Coast version, and indicate the CC license and a hyperlink to the license, all the things we covered before. Section 4 is something that really comes from European law, where there are specific European rules around databases. And what this really says is, hey, yes, you can have a database be Creative Commons or put things in a database. This does not somehow not include databases. So for that specific of European law, this is included there. Section 5, disclaimer of warranties and limitation of liability, that you aren't providing representations of warranties or any kind. You can consider the material to be as is for someone else to use it in the way they want to, and they can't come back and sue you for how well it worked or anything like that. You're not stipulating that the material will do any particular thing for them. All right, so section 6 is termination. And this is all very reasonable. What it says is, hey, if you are not following this license, then it terminates, right? And it can reinstate if you fix the problem within 30 days of your discovery of the violation, or when the licensor, the person whose material you're using, chooses to reinstate it. So if you do something wrong, then you lose the ability to use this license until you fix it. You've got 30 days to do that. Section 7, no additional terms or conditions can be implied unless you agree. Section 8 is interpretation. This is sort of typical, under what situations a court would interpret it and how, and if one part doesn't work, the rest of it can still work. And typical kind of legal language like that. If you watch my OGL video, then this is somewhat similar to that situation. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If it is, please consider leaving comments down below. Let me know what you liked about the video, what kind of topics you like to see me cover in future videos. And please share this video so that other people can see it and learn about it. And if you really like the work I do, please consider supporting me on my Patreon. You can find links down below and also at alphastream.org under the Support Me area. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on Success in RPGs.